Get some!
Ice cream. Welcome to the Young Turks. I'm your host, Anna Kasparian, and oh my God, are you guys in for quite a show today? News regarding Matt Gaetz broke right before we went live, and it is a doozy of a story. We have the main show team working real hard to get that story produced, researched, and ready for you all. So we will be covering that breaking news in this hour. But before we get to that, we're gonna cover an update on the ongoing war, a story and study involving violent assaults on public transit workers. We're gonna discuss that as well. In the second hour, we're going to dissect an important topic. Are millennial managers the worst, or are they the best? And one of the other stories I'll be covering with John Idarola in the second hour today is yet another pastor defrauding and stealing from his parishioners. So you've got all that and more to look forward to. And if you want to share the message of TYT and share the work that we're doing here, it's a very easy way to do it. Just like and share the stream if you're watching us online. You can also help support us by becoming a member, tyt.com/join to become a member, or click on that join button if you're watching us on YouTube. You can also send us super chats if you're watching us on YouTube, and I'll do my best to read all of your comments before we wrap the show today. But before we get to any of that stuff, I do want to get to this update on Gaza.
The bombardment is unfolding them in every single corner of the city of Khan Yunis. We have been seeing within the past 24 hours and also within the past couple of days that the Israeli military is trying to take full control over the city there. But this time the military attacks had been reached to evacuation centers. We are talking about today one of the United Nations run facilities, which is a training center, which had been turned within the days of the war into an evacuation center for thousands of people in the city of Khan Yunis. Today had been bombardment.
What does the IDF consider not a Hamas command center or training center? Like, is there a single building in the Gaza Strip that the IDF doesn't use that justification to bomb? Now today, a United Nations training center that had been housing hundreds of Palestinians suffered mass casualties at the hands of the IDF as Israeli forces continue to intensify attacks in the southern Gaza city of Khan Yunis. As of right now, as we speak, it's known that 9 people were killed in the shelling with 75 people wounded. Here's more from the director of UNRWA explaining what allegedly happened at the UN shelter.
For the last sort of 48 hours, there's been fighting in and around a training college that we run as UNRWA in the western outskirts of Khan Yunis. Already in the last 2 days, there have been 8 people killed in and around this facility because of crossfire. This afternoon, the facility took a direct hit. It was actually on the carpentry building. Now, this is a building that's been housing 800 people who've been seeking shelter under a UN flag. We've got a team going up there right now that in fact just entered the facility. At this stage, we know that there are 9 fatalities and over 75 people have been injured in this tank strike on this building in an UNRWA training center in Khan Yunis.
Just want to note for the record, in case anyone's confused, you just heard from someone who is not a member of Hamas. You just heard from someone who's the director of UNRWA, someone who is attempting to provide humanitarian help to innocent Palestinian civilians. But nonetheless, he suspects that around 150,000 people are trapped in this part of Khan Yunis, and said that the United Nations received absolutely no warning ahead of the strike on their facility. Waji Ajour, who is sheltering in the facility, said that he could see tanks near the building. We are completely surrounded. There are Israeli military tanks just outside the walls of the building. Some people have shrapnel wounds from the fighting in the area, and the building also sustained damage. In response to questions about the shelling, the IDF said the wider area was a significant base of, oh, you guessed it, Hamas militants. Dismantling Hamas's military framework in Western Khan Yunis is the heart of the logic behind the operation, it said. And remember, this is in southern Gaza after they leveled northern Gaza and told Palestinian civilians to flee to the south for their safety. Not a single portion of the Gaza Strip is safe for any of the civilians there, half of whom are under the age of 18, many of whom happen to be children. That's why you see an overrepresentation of children getting killed in this war. Now, their main target appears to be the area around Khan Yunis's long-standing refugee camp, which includes the Nasser and Al-Amal hospitals, and also the UN training center. And while the IDF says that they have been telling people at these facilities to evacuate, residents say that leaving is impossible because the IDF is blocking roads and shooting at people who are trying to flee. Making matters even more difficult is the fact that some wounded people outside can't get into the hospital for much needed medical care. This happens to be one of the hospitals that's still functioning, or these two hospitals are still partly functioning, which is so important to know because it gives you a sense of how critical these hospitals are. And it's also too dangerous for these people inside the hospital to leave, given the fact that they're attacked by the IDF when they do. Look, here's a doctor explaining what happened to people who attempted to flee the Nasser medical complex after Israel ordered the entire neighborhood to evacuate.
Many civilians returned to the hospital with severe injuries, and many of them returned seeking for shelter in the hospital. We received 120 injuries and 52 mortals.
It's not just Nasser Hospital that's suffering. The Palestinian Red Cross Society, which runs the Al-Amal hospital, said troops had blockaded its staff inside and imposed a curfew in the area, including its local headquarters, where 3 displaced individuals had been killed. Israel says Hamas fighters, of course, operate in and around the hospitals, blah, 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 blah. We get the point. Hamas everywhere. That's the justification for leveling the entirety of the strip. The health ministry in Gaza said Wednesday that in 24 hours, 210 people have been killed and 386 others injured due to ongoing IDF operations. So far, the US government has basically supported everything that Israel's far-right government and its military has been doing. But what does America have to say about the latest UN facility shelling? Like a complete and utter coward, US National Security Council spokesperson John Kirby declined to weigh in on reports of a mass casualty event at a United Nations shelter in Khan Yunis, but said Israeli forces have taken steps to transition their operations, including moving toward more targeted operations. Oh, they're targeted all right, at refugees and injured civilians. Or maybe he's referring to the targeted killing of a Palestinian as he was carrying a white flag. British outlet ITV News filmed the moment an unarmed Gazan was shot and killed while standing with a group of men. Let's watch.
These pictures were filmed by a cameraman working for ITV News in Gaza. As he moved forwards towards the combat zone, he noticed this group of men doing their utmost to appear non-threatening, trying to proceed with care. They wanted to reach 2 other family members and get them out of harm's way.
عند الحجة واخويا وعنده حوالي 50 نازح او 70 نازح موجودين في البيت الثاني اللي يخش علينا لو طلعونا واخويا ما طلعوش بدنا نروح يعني نطلع ان شاء الله.
The interview complete, our cameraman walked away. And then this happened. The interviewee had been shot and fatally wounded. You can see them place their flag on his chest. As he was carried away, the white flag was turning red.
So as this man was attempting to get into a building to help escort other family members out as they were evacuating, as he's waving a white flag, they decide to shoot and kill him anyway. The victim was identified as 51-year-old Ramzi Abdul Salul. The Israeli Defense Forces, when approached by ITV News for comment, denied awareness of the incident. Questioned further, the IDF dismissed the video as clearly edited. So are they alleging that this news outlet in the UK, ITV News, is being dishonest in their reporting and editing the footage? Yeah, I think not. And we already know that Israeli forces shot at their own hostages as they were carrying white flags and speaking Hebrew. So the idea of them doing this again is really not far-fetched. The IDF says they'll continue heavy operations in Khan Yunis for several more days, and that's despite the lies John Kirby spewed earlier. This is what's happening on the ground. And what's really amazing to me, what really stands out to me is how little the IDF or the Israeli government cares about at least working harder to prevent the kind of footage that we all just witnessed. The footage of a Palestinian man waving a white flag, getting shot and killed. You would think that you have reporters right there, you have a cameraman right there. You think they'd be smart enough, to at least cover up the war crimes they're engaging in. But it is amazing that they don't do that, right? It is amazing that they commit the war crimes and then they proceed to lie to us and accuse journalists of editing the tape. Because at the end of the day, it doesn't matter what the general public in the United States or the UK thinks about all this, whether or not they think the war is justified, they don't care. The only thing that matters is that the governments of these two countries continue to support Israel regardless of what it does. And that is certainly what we're experiencing here in the United States and in the UK. It's just so shameful, so embarrassing. You can be in support of Israel going after Hamas while acknowledging that what is being carried out in the Gaza Strip, which has led to an incredibly high civilian death toll, is wrong. And the military operations that have been carried out, you can acknowledge that war crimes have been committed while still being in favor of Israel protecting its civilians or going after Hamas, which of course has leadership not in the Gaza Strip, but in other countries like Lebanon and Qatar. This is an absolute bloodbath. And honestly, I used to use the phrase indiscriminate bombing or indiscriminate attacks the IDF is carrying out in the Gaza Strip. But no, I think some of these attacks are actually targeted attacks. How do you shoot and kill an obvious Palestinian civilian man waving a white flag? That was a targeted shooting. IDF snipers shot and killed that man as he was just hopeful that he could get to the building to retrieve other family members for evacuation. That's what happened. All right, look, we're gonna move on to something entirely different. So shameful what the United States is complicit in, disgusting. Not just complicit, supportive of. You know what, in fact, let's just actually take a break. I need a breather. When we come back, we are gonna take a trip back to the United States. We have a story to cover in regard to public transit and what workers on public transit have been experiencing. Come right back.
Ice cream.
guys let's get the comments coming, okay? Because there aren't a lot of comments here yet. We've got Totejup5 who subscribed with Prime in our Twitch community and says, Anna Solo Hour, I'm here for it. I'm here for it as well, clearly. I'm really excited to share the news with you guys today. Layman Shaman says, wouldn't an attack on the UN give the UN the right to defend itself against Israel in the same fashion Israel defends itself? I think we all know the answer to that. I mean, this isn't a fair war, let's just put it that way. I Am Sock says, the IDF is a complete joke of a military, clowns at every rank and level. Totally agree. Boomer Dragon Cat says, that cameraman is probably very lucky he wasn't shot too. That is a devastating point, and you're right. Michael Napin says, oh my God, I'm late for Anna Solo. May TYT have mercy, I was cleaning the kitchen. Michael, if I could get paid to clean the kitchen, I would spend my days cleaning kitchens. Like, I gotta be, like, paid, a livable wage in Los Angeles, which, if you're staying at hotels, by the way, and you're not tipping the hardworking people who make your bed and clean your room, you're a bad person. You should tip them. But yeah. Anyway, Uriah Heep says, when you drop a 2,000-pound bomb, don't try and sweet talk us into your intentions. Totally agree. Art Guy, always good to hear from you, and I know that you are appreciative of my power jacket. Watch out, she's wearing the power jacket. I am. It's a nippy day today in LA. Jerry Ty 429 says, perhaps one should condemn Hamas as loud as possible while waving white flags to avoid getting fatally shot. Sarcasm. Yeah, I don't think anything could have prevented them from doing what they did there. They were gonna do it, and they did it. Like, it's just, even with reporters and a cameraman right there, it's amazing, it really is. Lucius writes in our Twitch community and says, hello from, oh God, you're so lucky. Hello from sunny Costa Rica. Would it be too nihilistic to say that since governments don't care, this will keep on going as it has been going in Africa and other countries? Is profit versus humanity, it's profit versus humanity, and we all know what wins. But the one thing that gives me hope this time around is the protests against this war, young people showing up at Biden events and interrupting his speeches. Like, he was speaking and was interrupted recently 14 separate times by pro-Palestinian protesters. People are fired up, and honestly, I've never seen this kind of dissent in regard to what Israel is carrying out before. So that should give you at least a little bit of hope. Stephen Bowen in our member community says, our Prime Minister Rishi Sunak cannot work out if Israel is committing war crimes after being questioned about that ITV video in Parliament today. So I actually saw that, and I'm hoping that James O'Brien covers it on his show, the James O'Brien Show on LBC. It's a UK, I think, radio station, if I'm not mistaken. I watch it on YouTube. Anyway, listen, I need you all to hit him up and get him to go back to covering Israel, because he did a great job, and I want to hear what he has to say. But anyway, with that said, let's move on to our next story, which isn't related to the war. It's a little different. We're going to talk about something that's been kind of building up here in the United States, and I think it's finally starting to become enough of a problem that government officials are taking notice.
According to the Federal Transit Administration, in recent years, there's been a 121% increase in transit worker assaults like this one. In July, gunfire shattered glass around this bus driver on Oakland, California's AC transit system, which, according to the FTA's preliminary 2023 data, has the highest rate of assaults on transit workers in the country.
It's been rough persuading those living in the country's urban centers to ditch their cars for public transit. And incidents like the one you just watched have a lot to do with it. But those who lack other means of transportation have it much worse, as they're increasingly met with violent attacks and assaults on buses, at subway stations, and on trains. We'll get back to the experiences of those who rely on public transit in just a moment, because what they've been going through is absolutely outrageous, to say the least. But I want to start off by drawing specific attention to the terror that transit workers are facing as they simply try to do their jobs. Keep in mind, they work in jobs that are incredibly important, essential to communities around the country. But they feel as though their lives and their safety is nothing more than an afterthought. The Urban Institute recently studied major assaults involving transit workers for bus and rail services. What they found was disturbing, including the fact that assaults have actually tripled since 2008. Major assaults on transit workers, meaning those resulting in death or a trip to the emergency room, rose nearly threefold nationally between 2008 and 2022, from 168 to 492, the Urban Institute found, using data from the Federal Transit Administration's National Transit Database. For some who want to minimize this, those numbers might not sound like a lot. But remember, we're only talking about assaults that led to a fatality or someone getting hospitalized. Those numbers do not include less grievous assaults like hitting, kicking, and spitting. In other words, the number of assaults on transit workers is much, much higher. Operators have also reported being robbed, having things thrown at them, being doused with urine and hot beverages, being threatened at gunpoint, and shot at. Back in 2022, the Washington Post profiled the story of a Denver area bus driver named Suna Karabe, who had immigrated to the United States from Turkey and absolutely loved her job. That is, until she didn't. Much like other big cities, crime, public drug use, and homelessness exploded in Denver during the coronavirus pandemic. Karabe was confronted by the dysfunction as riders spit on her, hit her, and even threatened her with deadly weapons like knives. The windshield of her bus had been shattered multiple times by people throwing rocks or bottles at her. She told reporters that she was even chased into a restroom during one of her breaks. Some of the incidents that were highlighted by that Washington Post piece were so horrifying that I don't think I could ever forget the piece and the overwhelming sense of injustice Karabe was dealing with. There was Billings Street, where in the summer of 2021, a mentally unstable passenger tried to punch a crying toddler, only to be tackled and then shot in the chest by the toddler's father. And Dayton Street, where Suna, the bus driver, had once asked a man in a red bikini to stop smoking fentanyl, and he'd shouted, "Here's your COVID, bitch," before spitting in her face. And Downing, where another number 15 bus driver had been stabbed nearby with a 3-inch blade. The most horrifying episode happened on North Yosemite Street. An intoxicated and emaciated 57-year-old woman had jumped out in front of a moving number 15 bus, shouted at the driver to stop, and then pushed her way on board. She'd started cursing at other passengers, pacing up and down the aisle until a man twice her size stood up in the back of the bus and punched her in the face with a closed fist, slamming her to the floor. "Who ain't never been knocked out before?" he asked, as the woman lay unconscious in the aisle. And then he stood over her as the other passengers sat in their seats and watched. "Here's one more," he said, stomping hard on her chest. He grabbed the woman by the ankle and flung her off the bus, leaving her to die of blunt force trauma on the sidewalk. "We can keep riding though," one of the other passengers had told the driver moments later. "We gotta go to work, man." Now, the driver was understandably worried that the man was going to hurt her next. But as he was walking off the bus, he banged his fist into the windshield, cursed, and then exited, luckily without harming her. Other public transit workers aren't so lucky. Look, I got a lot of grief from some members of the left last year for highlighting the story of an African-American subway worker in New York City who was sent to the hospital with a broken collarbone after he was viciously assaulted. A man who has been arrested 41 times for assault has just sent a New York City subway worker to the hospital with a broken collarbone and a dislocated nose. Now, the suspect, Alexander Wright, again, has been arrested for assault 41 separate times, but apparently that's not enough to keep him out of the public to ensure that people are safe. Nelson's family is furious about this. Again, they're wondering why he was out on the street. Lisa Nelson, the victim's mother, says, this man, Alexander Wright, should not be walking the streets. I hope these politicians and these judges give him the max that he deserves and do not let him walk free. And by the way, one of Alexander's past victims was involved in a hate crime as well toward an Asian woman. We're gonna show you the video of what he did. It's difficult to watch, so I wanna give you that warning. But without further ado, this is a man who's been arrested 41 times and is just released back onto the streets to assault other people. This is unacceptable. This is 100% unacceptable. I'm done with this. Whatever this is not criminal justice reform. Allowing people who are clearly a threat to public safety, allowing people who are assaulting and hurting workers as they're just trying to do their jobs and get through the day, unacceptable. Now, prominent progressives like Breonna Joy Gray weren't happy with me for refusing to provide cover for that brutal assault in the name of, I guess, leftism.
Part of why people were upset on the internet is because Ana Kasparian works for what is perceived to be one of the flagship left media outlets in the country. So for one, I just want to say that part of the response to her was not an expectation that she's representing the kind of normie view of criminal justice, but that she is ostensibly supposed to be representing the left view. And regardless of whether you agree with her, she absolutely didn't do that.
I'm sorry. I didn't realize that wanting to protect workers from violent assaults on the job wasn't a left-wing priority. I actually thought it was. I also thought the left wanted people to, transition to public transportation and drive their cars less. But who the hell would want to do that if this is what they'll have to deal with? The Washington Post reporting I was referencing earlier briefly mentioned similar trends in other cities across the country. Philadelphia was reporting an 80% increase in assaults aboard buses. The transportation union president in Tucson said the city's buses had become a mobile refuge frequented by drug users and mentally ill and violent offenders. The sheriff of Los Angeles County had created a new transit unit to keep passengers from having to step over dead bodies or people injecting themselves. Los Angeles, the city I was born and raised in. It's also the city where citizens were set ablaze by mentally unstable people who should have been institutionalized. Like on May 7th of that year, when out of nowhere, a mentally ill homeless woman squirted a man with flammable liquid and set him on fire with a lighter in Pasadena. That man was rushed to the hospital in serious condition, but luckily survived. That same month, another man was set on fire at a downtown LA bus stop near Olympic and Flower Street. Fortunately, he survived too. But earlier that same year, in January of 2022, a healthcare worker was attacked by a mentally ill homeless man at Union Station in downtown LA. She wasn't as lucky and died as a result. Carrie Bell was charged with murdering Sandra Shells, who worked as a nurse at USC Medical Center. Shells was attacked shortly after 5 a.m. on Thursday, January 13th at a bus stop on Cesar Chavez Avenue. And according to investigators, Bell punched Shells so hard that she fell to the concrete, fracturing her skull. The investigation reveals she was attacked for no apparent reason. But maybe I should be a good leftist and pretend like these incidents didn't happen? Nah, I'll keep speaking up, thanks. In fact, incidents like these led to an outcry by maintenance workers at Union Station. We're talking about low-wage workers, many of whom are immigrants, with difficult jobs that were made even more unbearable by the violence they deal with at work. They didn't sign up for that, and they don't deserve it. According to Alejandra Valles, who works as the chief of staff for the SEIU United Service Workers West, 19 of the 21 janitors working at Union Station reported being threatened or assaulted while doing their jobs. One of the custodial workers told the Los Angeles Times, "We are scared, we are frustrated. Every day something happens. We don't know if we are going to return home to see our children." Renee Herrera, who's one of the managers at a deli called Tremana at Union Station, said that people have quit their jobs over the abuse. And that was a broader trend reflected in the study by the Urban Institute. In fact, another study, a survey by the American Public Transportation Association, found that more than 9 in 10 public transit agencies were having difficulty hiring new employees, particularly bus drivers. That sounds kind of important, no? If you want people to ride public transportation, you need workers for public transit, and you need people who feel safe enough to actually use the public transportation. Principled progressives rightly care deeply about workplace conditions, and they demand that companies and corporations protect their employees while they're on the job. These demands shouldn't take a backseat when violence is carried out by the mentally ill or those struggling with addiction and homelessness. In fact, and I want to be clear about this, most people with mental illness do not harm others. But unfortunately, some do. Some do harm others. And instead of imprisoning them, they need to be removed from the public to receive mandatory and adequate mental health treatment. Emphasis on the mandatory part. The Urban Institute unfortunately boils the problem down to income inequality, likely because they don't want to ruffle feathers with the criminal justice reform squad that wants to avoid institutionalizing anyone who poses a threat to public safety. Like the repeat offender who sucker punched an Asian woman and then went on to send a subway worker to the hospital with broken bones. Did Breonna Joy Gray think that that person should have been sent to either a facility for mental health or to prison? I don't know, let's watch.
As horrible it is to sucker punch someone in the face, you don't go to jail for 40 years for that, and nor should you. Right? Obviously, you should not go to jail for the rest of your life.
And you
for
go to
that.
jail.
So the point is
but
that
you do have to go to jail.
He's gonna keep getting out. People like these are gonna keep being on the street because the jail is not a solution to the kinds of issues that they're dealing with.
I respectfully disagree. Some people need to be rehabilitated, whether it be through mental health treatment or through a reformed prison system. You know, prisons could be reformed to be rehabilitative rather than abusive torture chambers. Simply throwing our hands up and saying that prisons are bad is ridiculous. Fortunately, in 2017, California reformed Valley State Prison as part of a pilot program meant to operate like the facilities you'd find in Nordic countries. The emphasis is rehabilitation, and it's nicknamed Prisnyland.
But the more you get to know Prisnyland, which officials say some locals refer to it as, you realize the first barriers coming down aren't actually physical.
One of the principles of the California model is normalization, and the idea is we want to make the environment inside our institutions as normal as possible, with the goal of not releasing somebody who's institutionalized, but releasing citizens back to the community who have practiced normal pro-social behavior. Our goal is to basically help them become better citizens. So with that in mind, we are not in the punishment business. We're in the rehabilitative business.
A big part of that rehabilitation, a wide array of programs where the population learns a variety of coping and calming skills.
And she is a good horse.
Did you know you were going to be grooming horses in prison?
No, to be honest, I thought I'd be stuck in a cell, maybe a few rehabilitation groups, but it helps me, cope with, a lot of stresses I deal with, day to day here in prison.
The hope is that creating a more positive environment makes the men locked up here more willing to rehabilitate. Of the total incarcerated population of 3,000 here, the prison says 2,400 are enrolled in training or education programs, including high school and college.
When you came in and you saw what this was, what was your impression?
I thought I was gonna come to prison and get worse, but coming to prison actually saved my life.
Wow. Say it again.
Coming to prison saved my life.
You guys have no idea how relieved I was to see this. This was a report done by NBC weeks ago, and it wasn't on my radar until literally today as I was researching for this story. And so there are 2 prisons now, state prisons in California, that are part of this pilot program. And I love to see it because my concern was that all of the so-called reforms led to like the dysfunction that we're seeing on the streets. And that leads to a much smaller appetite for the reforms that we need in policing and in our prison system. Okay, and there are already some promising results with Valley State Prison's new model. According to reports from the California Department of Corrections and Rehabilitation, prisons across the state have seen between 15 to 32 homicides each in total, right? And that's between the years of 2017 and 2021. But at Valley State, there have been 0 homicides within that state prison in that same time period, meaning that it is a safer environment where people are actually getting rehabilitated. And this is the kind of facility that I would like to see, created in other parts of the state, other parts of the country. So it's not just about being punitive, it's about ensuring that people are rehabilitated and are able to make good lives for themselves once they serve their sentence. This is what we should be fighting for on behalf of everyone in our communities. The hands-off approach to violent crime ensures that everyone loses. And I just want to be clear about one other thing. The other thing that we're experiencing right now on the streets is you have people who have mental illness, struggling, suffering, unable to make decisions for themselves, unable to make the decision to get the mental health treatment they need, or maybe unable to get the mental health treatment they need. And instead of institutionalizing them after they commit some sort of crime or engage in a violent attack, to keep the public safe, the argument is, well, that violates the civil liberties of the individual that we're allowing to wallow away and die on our streets. And by the way, if they're lucky, because if they're not lucky, the other thing that happens is they will commit a violent crime so terrible, including literally setting people on fire, that they'll end up in prison for the rest of their lives. So how exactly is that the humane option? Either death on the streets, or you're gonna end up in prison for the rest of your life. No, this is a broken system. This doesn't work. This doesn't make the situation better. Everyone loses with what we've been doing. But I am happy to see that there is some positive change happening in the state of California. And look, I don't care what my label is. I don't care if I'm being a very naughty leftist for telling the truth about what's happening. Call me left, call me right, call me center, I don't care. My number one principle, like the motivating factor, the thing I care about the most, and what informs my opinions on political policy is doing what's right for workers in America. I'm never gonna advocate for any policy that asks workers to deal with even more hell at work, including violent assaults. No, not interested in that. All right, we gotta talk to you a little bit about this breaking news story. It's a doozy and it's about Matt Gaetz, so let's get right to it. The House Ethics Committee investigating Congressman Matt Gaetz has reached out to the women whom the congressman allegedly had sexual relations with, including someone as young as 17 years old, according to a source familiar with the committee's work. Oh yeah, that DOJ investigation, which came to an end, apparently the investigation hasn't really come to an end when it comes to this House Ethics Committee looking into the allegations. Now, just rewinding a little bit, a few years ago, news broke regarding a DOJ investigation that was launched under the Trump administration, by the way. This investigation didn't start under the Biden administration. And it was over allegations that Matt Gaetz had sexual relations with a minor and that he had basically paid the minor to travel to his state, to where he was, in order to engage in a sexual relationship. That was the allegation. Well, apparently this House Ethics Committee was not satisfied with the DOJ investigation. They kept investigating and they talked to more women. They reached out to more people. And so now there's a sign that the GOP-led committee's investigation into this Florida Republican, Matt Gaetz, has recently expanded to include questioning around allegations of sex crimes. According to CNN, sources say the committee has also reached out to the Justice Department requesting materials from its investigation into Gaetz, which included allegations of lobbying violations, sex trafficking, and possible obstruction of justice. Again, now that federal probe, which included these allegations, concluded back in 2023. So last year they wrapped it up, and apparently Matt Gaetz is innocent. That's according to the DOJ. But there must be something going on with what the House Ethics Committee has been looking into. There must have been some incriminating evidence that they've come across based on the conversations that they've had with other women. And now they're requesting that the DOJ provide some of the investigative materials that they had come across as they were doing their investigation. Now, Gaetz has repeatedly denied any wrongdoing, including ever having sex with a minor or paying for sex. He says that those allegations were not true, have never been true, and the people who spread those lies have been exposed, indicted, and imprisoned. Have they? Have they? But he also thinks that this House Ethics Committee investigation, which again, these are Republicans, like there are Republicans investigating him, members of his own party. He argues that this is just retaliation for his decision to oust former House Speaker and former Republican Congressman Kevin McCarthy. So I don't know what the truth is, right? This story just broke. I thought that after the DOJ dropped the investigation into Matt Gaetz, they would let it go and that was it. But no, there's apparently more going on, and I'm uncertain of what the committee has found. I'm uncertain if it's anything really robust enough to go after Matt Gaetz aggressively, but the fact that they've reached out to the DOJ, I think, should be concerning for Gaetz. Now, McCarthy denies that the investigation into Matt Gaetz was motivated by Gaetz ousting McCarthy as House Speaker. He says, I don't believe them to be conservatives, McCarthy said in November, referring to the 8 Republicans who actually voted to oust him. Gaetz was one of them. McCarthy had said at the time that it's driven by Gaetz, and it was all based upon ethics complaints that happened in the last Congress. He would throw his country away to try to protect himself for what would come out as the truth. That is what Kevin McCarthy had said. What does Kevin McCarthy know? And what does the Ethics Committee know? The Justice Department, by the way, does not have to comply with a voluntary request from the House Ethics Committee. And that's according to Norman Eisen, who served as counsel to House Democrats in former President Donald Trump's first impeachment. If a request seems merited as part of the usual accommodation process between the legislative and executive branches, DOJ will sometimes provide some information, but they tend to be withholding of sensitive investigative materials. And even when the House issues a subpoena, the Justice Department typically holds back much of their internal investigation. I don't know why they do that. If there's any evidence of wrongdoing that the House Ethics Committee came across, the DOJ should cooperate and provide some of the materials that the Ethics Committee is asking for. Again, we're talking about Republicans investigating one of their own. That never happens, okay? That never happens. And I'm super curious to figure out what is happening here and how this story is going to continue developing. Now, as part of the sprawling investigation, Joel Greenberg, a former Florida tax collector and close confidant of Matt Gaetz, pleaded guilty in 2021 to 6 federal charges, including soliciting and paying a minor in the Gaetz allegation for sex. The Ethics Committee, controlled by Democrats originally, by the way, opened its investigation in 2021. So this is the previous congressional session where Democrats still had control of the House. They launched the investigation, publicly announcing that it was examining a range of allegations, including that Gaetz violated sex trafficking laws. But the committee later deferred the investigation at the request of the Justice Department, which again eventually dropped the investigation entirely. But it appears that the House Ethics Committee, now under Republican control, decided to continue with the investigation. And so a source familiar with the House panel's work previously told CNN that the Justice Department's decision not to bring charges against Gates does not impact what the committee will and won't investigate. The committee plans to examine the same allegations they were looking into when they opened the investigation in 2021, the source told CNN. So buckle up. I feel like this is a story that will continue to develop, and once it does, once we have new details, we will share them with you. It might be the case that Gates is found completely innocent. He denies it. The DOJ didn't, find any evidence that led to the prosecution of Matt Gates. So we're gonna have to wait and see. But this doesn't look good. I just have that gut feeling that this is not good news for Matt Gates. So we'll see what happens. In the meantime, we're gonna take a brief break. When we come back, more news. What's up, everyone? Welcome to our social break. Cabbage Dragon writes in, and thank you so much for the generous super chat. I consider myself to be pretty media literate and watch, read, listen to so many different sources, same, but I've never heard of them attacking Anna. I could send you some stuff. I mean, I provided an example, but there's definitely more examples. I'm not saying those haters are loser wannabe jealous of the salt dragon, but I'm not saying it. I don't think it's a jealousy thing at all. Like, I'm not saying that, I don't think that. I just think that, and this tends to happen with all political groups, right? Doesn't matter if you're on the right, left, progressive, leftist, doesn't matter. You kind of find yourself in like a filter bubble, and everyone is just like repeating the same talking points, almost to the point where you're expected to regurgitate default, typical expected talking points. But once you pierce out of that bubble and you start to kind of examine things as an independent thinker, and then you speak out in a different way, people are they feel blindsided by that. They think that you're like grifting or you're looking for some like right-wing payday. I'm right here, and I've been here, I'm not going anywhere, okay? I don't care what people label me, you can call me whatever you want, but I'm always gonna give you guys the truth as I see it. I'm always gonna give you the details and the data and then share my perspective. And if you disagree with me, that's totally fine. But I just think that you need to engage with the subject matter. I think what I've been experiencing personally is, oh, you're just a right-wing grifter now. Okay, fine, you can call me that if you want. I'm not, but you can call me that if you want. Can you now engage with the subject matter? Because if you're unable to engage with it, then that's your bad, not mine. Anyway, we've got the bestest leftist who says, it's my birthday, though my gift is love. Hold on. Sorry, I'm trying to figure out what this says. It's my birthday, does my gift is love if Anna, I don't know what you mean. Sorry, you guys gotta proofread these before you put them in the document. Anyway, happy birthday to the bestest leftist, my bad. I was blocked years ago when defending your honor from the door hive. That's very sweet, thank you so much. Benjamin Morrill writes in and says, you got us, we got you, sister, hang in there, and thank you, we hurt with you. And another comment from Benjamin, Labor Salt Queen brings truth to the TV screen, and I finally get you. You're labor, not left, right, center. right on, sister. I'm down with that. I think that's a really good way of putting it, right? I mean, when I think about my moral foundations and again, what like motivates and drives the kind of analysis and commentary I do, I want workers to live good lives in this country. It's the richest country in the world. They deserve to live good lives. That's my #1 priority. Let's get back to the show. Listen, we got a fun name incoming, so buckle up, you're about to hear it. But we do need to cover some of the updates in regard to the Boeing planes that have been malfunctioning in various ways. So let's get right to it.
In an exclusive interview with NBC News, CEO Minicucci says Alaska technicians have found more loose bolts on grounded planes.
We found, some loose bolts on many of our MAX 9. So those, yeah. So those are things that are going to be rectified. It makes me angry, Tom. Boeing is better than this, and Flight 1282 should never have happened.
Alaska Airlines CEO Ben Minicucci, that is his name, that is how you pronounce it, we did double check, is furious with Boeing, which manufactures all of the planes in Alaska Airlines' fleet. Now that's because in the weeks after Alaska Airlines Flight 1282, when a door plug flew off a Boeing 737 MAX plane, a growing number of reports have proved just how error-prone the company's planes happen to be. Now, Minicucci isn't even the only CEO that's frustrated and furious about this, calling out the problem. Here's United Airlines CEO Scott Kirby explaining his thoughts on this whole matter.
Look, we're Boeing's biggest customer in the world. They're our biggest partner in the world. We need Boeing to succeed. And I have a lot of confidence in the people of Boeing. There's great mechanics, great engineers, great storied history. But they've been having these consistent manufacturing challenges, and they need to take action to get it. That's the point to Dave and to anyone, is it needs to be real action to make. If they don't,
and when you tell Dave Calhoun this, what does he say?
Well, he says yes, but I'm a lot more, he doesn't disagree, of course, but I am a lot more interested in seeing the actions. Like right now, we need to get through the MAX, we're doing that. But on the backside of this, what are the real actions to really get the manufacturing process back to the high levels of quality, consistency that historically existed at Boeing?
Get money out of politics. So companies like Boeing are no longer able to lobby our politicians to keep pushing for deregulation. That would impact the companies that he is the CEO of. But if you're worried about safety, and if you're wondering why Boeing has been able to get away with these issues with a lack of oversight, lobbying has a lot to do with it. And we'll get back to that in just a moment. But here at TYT, we have already covered multiple reports by The Lever about Boeing and its parts supplier, Spirit Aerosystems, both of which have prioritized profits over safety. Well, this morning, The Lever published yet another fantastic report on Boeing, this time revealing that over the last 3 years, operators of Boeing's troubled 737 MAX planes have filed more than 1,800 service difficulty reports, more than one per day, warning government regulators about safety problems with the aircraft. So airlines must file those service difficulty reports to the FAA with 96 hours of safety issues or safety malfunction. And the reports include false warning notifications, noxious odors, fuel leaks, engine shutdowns, brake system malfunctions, and other incidents. And look, all of this stuff sounds scary, is scary, and I just want to note that even though there have been all sorts of malfunctions reported in the news recently, luckily there have been no reports of fatalities or injuries. But this is a serious issue that needs to be dealt with immediately. The number of service difficulty reports is especially high with one airline in particular. So let's talk a little bit about that. Between December of 2020 and September of 2023, Alaska Airlines filed more than 1,230 reports related to the 53 Boeing 737 MAX planes it had in its fleet. For comparison, during the same period, the airline filed 25 reports for its 10 Airbus A321 Neo airplanes, the main competitor to Boeing's 737 MAX. So according to Ed Pearson, who's a former senior Boeing employee and founder of the Foundation for Aviation Safety, many of those incidents in these reports would not cause a plane to crash on its own, okay? There are issues, there are definitely malfunctions, but based on what was read in those documents and those filings, there was no indication that the malfunctions were serious enough to cause the plane to crash. But the sheer number of these reports indicates that something is wrong with how Boeing is manufacturing these planes. Pearson also told The Lever, what we're talking about is the cumulative effect of multiple emergencies at the same time. These add up, and these are new planes that should not be having these problems. There are clearly manufacturing defects because the planes haven't been operated long enough to do any kind of maintenance on them. These are brand new planes. And by the way, if you're wondering, okay, is there something up with Alaska? Because if Alaska Airlines has all of these reports of the Boeing planes malfunctioning, maybe Alaska Airlines is doing something wrong. But no, Alaska Airlines is actually doing the right thing by filing the necessary reports. There's some indication that other airlines aren't doing that, and that's a big problem. So according to Pearson, American Airlines, Southwest Airlines, and United Airlines don't appear to be submitting their reports in accordance with the spirit of the law, because we know that the Alaska planes were not built in a group. Southwest Airlines has over 180 MAX airplanes, and just a fraction of those reports. We think what's happening is that they're choosing not to submit the reports, and the FAA is not holding them accountable. Meanwhile, Boeing appears to be more interested in lobbying our federal government rather than keeping their passengers safe, or the passengers of their planes safe. For example, there have been more than 80 reports filed since April of 2021 involving the anti-ice system on Boeing's 737 MAX planes. Previously, in 2018, an anti-ice system caused a part of the engine on a 737 plane to snap off and strike a window, resulting in a fatality on a Southwest flight. Boeing is currently seeking an FAA exemption to use a new anti-ice system on its 737 MAX planes, but critics have warned against this, saying that if the system is left on for more than 5 minutes, engine parts could overheat and snap off. And it's not an isolated incident. Let's look at some other lobbying that's been taking place. Let's take a look at this graph. It's the annual lobbying by Boeing. And according to Open Secrets, Boeing spent over $12 million on lobbying the federal government every year from 2008 to 2022. The company fell just shy of that mark last year. I mean, it wasn't an election year, that's probably why. They spent a mere $10 million, $10,710,000 on lobbying. It's insane. And so I just find it so funny that you now have the CEO of Boeing meeting with individual senators to explain himself. One of those senators, by the way, is Ted Cruz. Are they really gonna pretend like they don't know what's up? It's like, hey, look, we took your bribes and we followed through with the deregulation. But just for show, we're gonna have these closed door meetings. So it appears like we're holding you accountable. No, you guys are corrupt and you guys went with the deregulation, and this is what you get. Companies have one job to do. What is their responsibility, everyone? Especially publicly traded companies, what is their responsibility? Their responsibility, their fiduciary responsibility is to their shareholders. So they're going to focus on maximizing profits, ensuring that manufacturing is foolproof, ensuring that everything is squared away, that there's proper oversight and everything is functioning well. That takes time and money. Those can be costly resources that they would rather funnel over to their shareholders. because that's their fiduciary responsibility, right? The responsibility of the government is to keep their citizens safe. And that includes regulating industries that are as important as the airline industry. This is insane, but this is what our system has devolved to. In short, the company has spent a huge amount of money, Boeing that is, on bribing our elected officials in a quest for deregulation. But the top brass at Boeing have received a massive return on that investment. So try to wrap your head around these numbers. Get ready. In total, over the past decade, according to SEC filings, Boeing spent roughly $573 million on total executive pay. In the last decade, Boeing has spent more than $40 billion on stock buybacks and distributed almost $22 billion in dividends to their shareholders. That fiduciary responsibility. And of course, that's according to regulatory disclosures. Many of Boeing's mass stock buybacks came after President Donald Trump's 2017 tax cuts, despite the fact that Boeing and other major companies promised to invest their resulting tax savings on capital expenditure and innovation. The only thing they're innovating over at Boeing these days is instilling more fear in American travelers. This is outrageous, it's unacceptable. And I'm not buying the little show that's happening with a few senators right now meeting with the Boeing CEO. They shouldn't get rewarded for that. You shouldn't be under the assumption that they're holding Boeing accountable at all. Holding Boeing accountable means passing regulations through legislation that ensure that they're doing their part to keep passengers safe. And I'm not seeing that right now. And until I do, no cookies for them. All right, we gotta take a break. When we come back, John Iadarola will be joining me for a fun second hour. But before we get to the fun, we'll talk a little bit about how Tim Pool is cheering on child labor in the state of Florida.
Obrador. The rest of the news media says you should not fight for positive change. If you do, you're not really a reporter or a journalist, because reporters and journalists don't care what happens. I don't agree. That's not written anywhere. That's not a law. It's just a rule that they invented so that reporters didn't actually challenge the people that are in power. Well, we don't agree with that. We think we should challenge the people in power, that actually makes you a better journalist, not a worse one. Everywhere you look, things are getting more expensive. Here at TYT, we understand this. That's why we're not gonna price gouge you or use inflation as an excuse to raise our prices. A TYT membership is not your typical subscription, but basic membership is still just $4.99. So what do you get for that price? For starters, you're getting exclusive programming, unique exclusive designs from Shop TYT, access to a members only chat, giveaways, emojis, and so many other amazing perks. But most importantly, you're helping to make an impact. As a TYT member, you not only help us do the shows every day, but you drive real positive change in the process. In 2017, we helped to start Justice Democrats right here on TYT. That's a group that got a dozen progressives elected into Congress. That's amazing, you did that. Your support also funds TYT's very own investigative reporting. Just recently, our reporters exposed the Fellowship Foundation and pressured lawmakers into boycotting that bigoted event. Isn't that amazing? We raised over $30,000 for Jackson, Mississippi, and delivered clean water to thousands of people in need. Our petitions, polls, and community of activists help keep the corruption of Washington in check. That's the impact of what just $4.99 a month from our members can do. And we're just getting started. Positive change doesn't occur overnight, but with your contribution, we can make it happen together.
I got pulled in. They told me, hey, listen, Cenk, we're insiders. We are the establishment. People in Washington tell me that they're concerned about your tone. We think that there's a better role for you, and it's not in 6 o'clock. The problem with the mainstream media is they're desperate to get access. They don't challenge the government. They don't challenge power. We're supposed to challenge the government. That's the role of the media.
Components that corrupt our politicians, I think, also corrupt mainstream media. It's really difficult for cable outlets to talk about things like income inequality, wealth inequality, when the advertisers that are funding their shows are the same corporations that want want to ensure that the same system continues. People watch digital media or new media, they get a completely different message. They focus on the issues that matter or resonate more with the constituency. We need to know one thing. Is the corporate media incompetent?
Corporate media, I can't hear you. Establishment press, where are you? I can't hear you. But the media's position I am clear on. Everything is pro-war, so everything is just framed that way. In this case, I mean, war is inevitable, right? I mean, the defense contractors should get a couple more $1 trillion. You ready for the stunning results? Only 6% of people say they have a great deal of confidence in the press. Wakey, wakey, okay? Progressives don't like the media either. You know why? It's the corporate media. Corporate media sounds like a conspiracy. Wait. Who owns you? Multi-billion-dollar corporations, public corporations. You have to do corporate media because corporations own us. Yeah, that's how it works.
Join the Dragon Squad by becoming a YouTube channel member. Click the join button below or sign up on tyt.com/join to get access to fun emojis, a member-only chat, exclusive shop TYT designs, ad-free watching, and so many other amazing perks. Plus, you get bragging rights for being part of the coolest community on the internet and help us drive real positive change in the world. The Dragon Squad awaits, so join today.
Welcome back to TYT. Anna Kasparian and John Idarola with you. John is hanging out in his shed, but he's ready to share the news with you. How you doing, John?
Why does that feel like a burn?
He's not
hanging out in that shed like a creep.
I would kill for a beautiful shed like the one you're working out of right now. So I'm actually jealous.
Well, if you ever live your shed dream, I will help you outfit the interior because it's a lot of fun.
Yes,
but anyway,
I love that.
I am glad that this shed allows me to remotely be on the show with you.
More John sheds, no more shedding tears. How about that? Okay, all right, that kind of
I take back my offer to help you with your shed.
Okay, sorry. All right,
you're on your own.
I just wanted to read one quick super chat from Doughboy75, who says, when it comes to public transportation, the United States always goes for the most half-assed solutions, then complain when no one wants to use it. I largely agree with you. You have to invest in public transportation and make it a desirable thing to use, right? And look, we've always had some issues with the metro system here in LA. It's a little fragmented, and there were always like, one or two people who might be having an episode, but you never felt unsafe. You never felt like you might, be hurt by anyone on the train. But it's just gotten really bad. I used to ride the Red Line all the time, especially when we would go to Dodgers games, and it was freaking fantastic. I loved it. And so I would love to have a public transit system that's safe, clean, easy to use, but you need to invest in it and you need to ensure that people are safe. So anyway, moving on, let's talk about something entirely different. The cheery topic of increasing child labor in America.
We've been weakening our society since before my time. I started working at like 13 years old, a full-time job. I wrestled. I played every sport you can imagine. So the idea that they can't afford to have these kids do this is an anomaly for me in my mind. If there's an issue with inflation, we should address that with the federal government, not the state of Florida. So I appreciate you running this bill. You guys continue doing the great work and help change the youth out there to have them start working full time.
That was Florida House Republican. His name is Kevin Steele. He was commenting on a bill that would severely weaken the state's laws meant to protect child labor, meant to protect children from certain child labor practices. Now, according to a very smart guy, Tim Pool, who actually cares about the working class, allegedly, he thinks this is a great idea. He thinks that loosening regulations to make it easier for kids to work in like long shifts during school nights, totally fine. He says, F yes, kids need jobs. Let's get our kids back to work. Now, he didn't care to explain why kids need jobs, but in reality, this legislation isn't meant to help kids. This legislation, you don't have companies that are like falling over themselves to give children opportunities. There's a reason why they want to employ children, and we'll get to that in just a moment. But first, we need to explain what this bill would do. So under current Florida state law, 16 and 17-year-olds cannot work between 11 p.m. and 6:30 a.m. on a school night for obvious reasons. I would hope people would find those reasons obvious. Work more than 8 hours if they have school the next day, and work more than 30 hours during a school week or more than 6 days in a row at any time of the year. Remember, these are kids and their focus should be just finishing school. They don't have to go to college if they don't want, but we're talking about minors who are in high school. I can't, we have issues right now with kids not being able to read in America. And now we're gonna make the situation worse by loosening child labor laws and pushing kids into low-paying jobs, which is exactly what this is. Now, not only would House Bill 49 remove all of those protections, but it would also prevent local communities from passing any stronger child labor protections, much like the Texas Death Star bill. Now, you won't be surprised to find out that the people pushing this bill are not kids looking to be exploited or their parents looking to exploit their kids. The bill originates from the Foundation for Government Accountability, which is a lobbying group with ties to several conservative billionaires and business owners. So the FGA is funded by a broad swath of ultra-conservative and Republican donors, such as the Ed Uline Family Foundation and 85 Fund, a nonprofit connected to political operative Leonard Leo, who have similarly supported other conservative policy groups. And the FGA put a lot of effort into rolling back child labor protections across the country. But unfortunately, that's not their only goal. They've already done a ton of damage in the state of Florida alone. With the FGA cheering him on, Florida Governor Ron DeSantis has cut unemployment benefits for out-of-work Floridians, signed a union-busting law meant to make it harder for most public sector employees in the state to collectively bargain, and led a brutal purge of the state's Medicaid rolls following the COVID-19 pandemic. And John, I could be wrong, but I would venture to say that the individuals pushing for the loosening of child labor laws are, maybe just looking for cheap labor, which they can get away with when it comes to children.
100%. Yeah, it couldn't be more clear. And the only thing they love more than exploiting kids is doing it and then pretending that that is their demonstration of their commitment to the workers or whatever. Yeah, so much about this is so explicitly dishonest. Tim Pool, he's saying get kids back to work. No, get Tim Pool back to work. He needs a job. Okay, clearly he does not feel satisfied with the contribution that he is making, and so he wants to inflict onto kids the dissatisfaction that he has. He should do some actual work. The individual, Kevin Steele, that you talked about in the first place. First of all, I want to be clear, this doesn't matter. Trying to encourage kids to cast off any aspirations beyond, whatever menial job they'll be allowed to have when they're 14 or whatever is ridiculous regardless of his personal experience. But when he talks about I had a full-time job, and I wrestled and I did all these sports and I turned out great. Well, first of all, you didn't turn out great because you became an adult who's trying to get kids to work. So you went astray at some point along the way, but also when were you wrestling if you were working this full-time job? What do you think full-time means? Is this like a midnight fight club that you were participating in? When was all of this sport happening? So I would love to have some people who knew him when he was a kid talk about what it actually was. He had a lemonade stand or he worked at the mall for a couple hours a week or something. And he thinks that that's justification to make kids work in meatpacking plants. By the way, I worked from a very young age, starting at 13, 14. I was a busboy, I worked at catering companies, I worked at a whole bunch of different stuff, but that was my choice, okay? And also, Probably I would have done better in school if I hadn't been doing that. If I didn't feel the need to raise that money, I probably would have been set on a better path for the rest of my life. But they're not interested in that.
Well,
and really fast.
I got to comment on something you said, because I think that there is an important distinction, and I don't want anyone to accuse us of being dishonest. Look, at the end of the day, it is the parent's choice and the teenager's choice as to whether or not they work these jobs, right? Even with the loosening of these child labor laws and protections. The problem is it creates a situation in which a 16-year-old can be scheduled to an 8-hour shift in the middle of the night. Like, you get what I'm saying? And if they refuse to take that shift because they have school the next morning, they might lose that job that they might like. They might enjoy working part-time. You get what I'm saying? So it creates a situation in which the power is shifted away from the government in being able to protect child labor from unfair practices and from ridiculously long shifts in the middle of the night, to giving the power to these companies to, schedule these teenage workers as they please.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, he might have had some sort of job. Was he working the night shift? Was he working 40, 50 hours a week? Was he working 6 days in a row? No, he 100% wasn't. It doesn't matter if he did, but he also wasn't. Let's be clear about that. And you made the point that, why aren't we addressing, kids' bad reading comprehension? I think they kind of are. They're not improving their ability to read, but they're perhaps removing their need to, because they're not interested in kids going on to true careers, working in scientific and creative fields. They're interested in beating that impulse out of them at a young age, of making them feel like they have to be, and at best they will be, cogs in the corporate machine that they pretend to have some sort of problem with when it's Disney. That's what it feels like. I think it's super obvious. And honestly, the only reason I think some parents would go along with this is they have been put in such hard economic times that they probably desperately need the contribution of their kids working.
Yeah, I am worried about that.
That's my fear.
That is my fear too. That's definitely my fear. And look, this isn't to say, John talked about how he had a job when he was young. I also had a part-time job when I was young. My first job ever was when I was 16, and I worked at a, what's the name of those donation centers? Goodwill. I worked at a Goodwill. I lasted a week because going through those bags of donated clothes was soul crushing, just based on what people were putting in those bags of clothes and how. You
disagree with the fashion choices?
No, it's.
I'm kidding.
Don't donate your dirty underwear. Be a decent human being, okay? It was, again, soul crushing. But I enjoyed, learning what it was like to work a job and have a manager. There are benefits that come along with it. You just have to ensure that there are extra protections for young people. Doing away with those protections, obviously it's turning the clock around, right? To an era when companies took full advantage of child labor, did not have safe working conditions for them. And as you guys know, we've been covering all these stories that have been coming out about, teenagers working at meat processing plants and dying on the job because they're working with heavy machinery that they weren't supposed to be working with to begin with. So even with the protections in place, I feel like the government has done a pretty awful job in implementing penalties that would discourage them from breaking the law. But now the matter will be made worse by loosening some of the regulations that were meant to protect I don't even want to say child labor, but it is true, underage people in the workplace. Anyway, all right, we got to take a break. When we come back, we've got more news for you, including an incredible story, crazy story, although sadly it's not rare. Yet another pastor who decided to defraud and steal from his own parishioners. Crypto makes an appearance here, don't miss it. Ice cream. Welcome back to our social break. Let me scroll over to our members section and say thank you to Priscilla Cook and Peanut Gallery for becoming new members. Also, thank you to Benjamin Morrill for gifting 1 TYT membership and Cabbage Dragon for doing the same. You guys are amazing. Thank you for supporting the work we do. Look, I hate asking people for any help. It's one of the most difficult things for me to do. It's probably something I should work on. But as you guys know, a lot of journalists have been laid off recently. It is just awful out there in the media landscape for anyone who wants to deliver news to people, and it's heartbreaking. It's a really rough environment, and again, a lot of people are losing their jobs. Because of our members, we've been able to keep going, and I'm so grateful for you. And if you are able to become a member, please consider it. It'll help us stay afloat, even with this incredibly difficult media landscape. tyt.com/join to become a member. And thank you again to everyone who's already become one. Athena Onken writes in and says, hi, love the show. Salt Dragon, keep it up. You and John make a good combo. Thank you. We've got T. Freeman. Seems everything and everyone in Gaza is a target, even the hostages. It does seem that way. Woke Dragon says, I honestly cannot believe hospitals in Gaza still have staff. These people are incredibly brave. And think about the aid workers who remain in Gaza and want to continue providing aid. By the way, the other thing is, some of you might have noticed that reports coming out of Gaza have like slowed down. And it's because a lot of journalists have been killed. Some journalists have left out of their own safety. I'm terrified it's gonna get to a point where we're not gonna get any reports at all. And so it's important to know what's happening on the ground, because if you just rely on what the IDF is saying, obviously we're not gonna get the truth. Sarah Lila says, please tell Bart I love him.
I just love you.
I knew he'd be ready with something. I knew it. Demetrius Johnson, who's been a member for 39 months, says, Queen Anna speaking the truth and bringing the receipts. Demetrius, thank you for saying that. I appreciate it. And Waza Hakimi, who's been a member for 19 months, says, Anna, as an Afghan who was on the front line of war, I hurt so much for my Palestinian brothers and sisters. But seeing your empathy gives me hope for humanity because I feel so helpless. I gotta say, thank you for saying that. This ongoing war has really made me want to dig even deeper in learning about the Armenian genocide. And I knew about, but I read more deeply into what was referred to as the Adana massacres in 1909. Read about that and tell me that it's not so similar to what's happening in the West Bank. The Adana massacres, 1909, read about it. Read about the tactics that were utilized by the Ottoman Empire in regard to the Armenian population living there at the time. Anyway, we gotta take a break. We'll see you in the next segment. Welcome back to the show, everyone. Anna Kasparian and John Idarola with you. And John, Maddie writes in to let us all know, oh my God, I am quite literally coming to y'all live from my shed as we speak, where I usually am listening to the live show. I call it my lesbian den because it has all my woodworking projects and tools. Maddie, I wanna hang out with you. That sounds amazing.
A woodworking shed?
Me too.
That sounds great. Could we get, I don't know if Maddie's on like the Discord or whatever, but I would love anybody who has a shed to share some photos of your shed. Give us a rundown of your shed life. That's what I'd like to see.
Make me jealous because I too want a shed. I don't have one. John, your shed is too nice for woodworking. Your shed is for...
Well, it's also too small. Like, I don't know what people think the size is, but I can almost touch the back wall from where I'm sitting right now. And I can almost touch both of these walls from here. It was the minimum size for a desk, but it is nice, I do like it.
It's beautiful, beautifully decorated. You have impeccable taste, John Idarola.
Thank you.
All right, well, let's get right to our next story because this one, unfortunately, involves yet another religious figure stealing from people who had faith in him.
Caitlin and I are being charged in a civil charge from the Colorado Securities and Exchange Commission for basically selling millions of dollars worth of cryptocurrency that is deemed worthless by the state. We were just always under the impression that God was going to provide, that the source was never ending, that God was doing a new thing, and that we had nothing to worry about.
Were you? Were you under the impression that you could lie to your parishioners, get them to purchase worthless cryptocurrency, and then God would provide? Did you really think that? I would venture to say that wasn't the case, but let's backtrack a little bit and give you the context here. That's Eli Regalado, who is an online pastor who was recently charged with civil fraud for selling a cryptocurrency that regulators described as practically worthless. Now he's saying he may have misheard God when God told him to rip a bunch of people off. So Colorado Securities Commissioner filed a legal complaint against him and his wife, Caitlin, last week. The couple raised nearly, get a load of this, $3.2 million by targeting Denver's Christian community with a cryptocurrency marketed as index coin. Now, investigators accuse the couple of violating Colorado's anti-fraud, licensing, and registration laws. They allege the cryptocurrency was promoted as a low-risk, high-profit investment, while it was actually illiquid and practically useless. Cryptocurrency is usually able to be converted into cash or other currencies through a digital platform or, trading exchange. But investors who purchased index coin were unable to convert the cryptocurrency into anything, into cash or to any other kind of currency because of technical failings. So the filing alleged that while investors lost millions of dollars, the Regalados used the funds to support their lavish lifestyle. The couple sold the digital asset to more than 300 investors between June of 2022 and April of 2023. And according to Colorado Securities Commissioner, the Regalados had no experience with cryptocurrency, something that became apparent when a third-party auditor's report allegedly described their index coin code as unsafe, unsecure, and riddled with serious technical problems. And in this incredibly bizarre announcement video that he made, he literally admits to doing exactly what he's accused of, which is fun. Let's watch.
Now, the reason that they're saying that it's worthless is because there is no exit for people who have bought. So everyone that's watching this, who has put money into this, who wanted to take money out, you've been unable to do that. We launched an exchange, the exchange technology failed, things went downhill, and from that point forward, we've just been waiting on the Lord literally for a miracle. The charges are that Caitlin and I pocketed $1.3 million, and I just want to come out and say that those charges are true. So there's been $1.3 million that's been taken out of, I think it was a total of $3.4 million. But out of that 1.3, $500,000 went to the IRS and a few $100,000 went to a home remodel that the Lord told us to do.
Come on.
He wanted a shed.
No, he wanted more than that. He wanted more than that. The authorities are accusing us of pocketing $1.something million, and I'm here to tell you that it's true. It reminds me of Gavin Newsom when he gave that press conference where he's like, people are accusing me of cleaning up the streets of San Francisco in preparation for Xi Jinping's visit to California, and I'm here to tell you that it's true. Okay, thanks for the admission, Jesus.
Yeah, the whole time I was watching that, I was just thinking, stop telling the truth. I don't like it.
No, tell the truth.
Your lies were so much better than the truth because it reminded me of, Brett used to do the honest press conferences or whatever thing. It's like, this all looks like the place where, because you're a con man, that you would lie to me, but you're refusing to do that, and it's making me queasy. Yeah, so look, it's weird that he would be so open and upfront about what they spent the money for and how it all failed and everything. I do think, look, to be fair, there's a lot of anti-cryptocurrency sentiment out there, particularly the last few years because of these scams and everything. And it is easy for people to say that they're very high-risk investments. But I want to inject a little bit of nuance into this.
No.
It is an incredibly high-risk investment for the people buying it. But if you're setting it up, it's very low risk, actually. It's like almost a sure thing. If you have a platform and you set it up and you pawn it off on them, you can make a bunch of money. And I think that we need to acknowledge how good of an investment it is for the scam artist. Okay, so let's be fair, Anna.
Unless you're as dopey as this guy, and like you, not only do you get caught, you confess to your crimes. But look, he goes even further.
They still support him, though. They still support him. He could do further scams in the future. He's not done. He got away with a bunch of the money. That's the amazing thing. And honestly, I shouldn't have to tell him about what he can do here. He already said, we're now waiting for a miracle from God. But I don't think that God wants us to just wait for things to happen. He wants us to be an active part of the world. So here's an idea. Give all of the money you have to the people that you defrauded. Maybe he doesn't have all that money, the money he gave to the IRS or whatever, but he has money for a studio. Give that to the people who lost everything, because you're acting as if everybody needs a miracle. As of right now, you don't need a miracle. The pastor doesn't need a miracle. They're fine. They have a newly upgraded house. Sell it. Sell the house and distribute the money to those who maybe lost their house thanks to your miscommunication with God.
You know, look, but should he be punished when in reality, the person who we should really blame is God? According to him, let's watch.
I said, Lord, I don't want to do this. I don't know how to do this. I don't have any experience in this industry. I don't know what I'm doing. I don't want to be caught up in something. And this is where we are right now. This looks bad. I know this looks terrible. You know, I was reading in Joshua earlier this morning, and I just said, Lord, I said, we did what you told us to. We sold a cryptocurrency with no clear exit. We did. We took God at his word and sold a cryptocurrency with no clear exit. So one of two things have happened. Either I misheard God and every one of you who prayed and came in, you as well. Or two, God is still not done with this project and he is going to do a new thing.
God damn it. Come on, God. Do your part. What the hell? Like the ball's on this guy, John, the ball's on this guy. Like it's amazing, it is amazing. This is amazing.
Number one, I misheard God. You know, he speaks really loud. It's like I'm ringing in the ears. Number two, maybe he's not done. Maybe you guys give me more of your money. Here's a number three, maybe God had nothing to do with any of this. I love that he doesn't even consider the possibility that maybe he wasn't talking to God. I would isn't humility a thing in Christianity? Maybe you would consider that you're not the prophet that you think you are. Could that possibly be it? I mean, number four is that there's no God whatsoever, and we're just, you know, carbon put together in almost a random sort like thing, and we're flying through space, and we need to make do with what we can. But I'm not going to ask him to consider that. But at least for his followers, consider the possibility that he is just some dude. He's a guy who doesn't want to get a regular job. And so he does that show where he scams people out of their money. He's not alone. There's a reason they went into crypto, Anna. It's because they saw year after year all of the successful scams that people were running. And you know, we were talking earlier, it sucks. Religious people are not the only ones that get scammed in this way. But it really is kind of rough, you know, being a religious person because you are targeted constantly. The people who proclaim to be the most holy sure seem to think that you people are gullible. And if I was a religious person, that would really bother me. Look, they don't seem to be that bothered by it, but anyway, what do you think?
Aside from this scam, there are all sorts of scams going around. A lot of scams target elderly people, which makes my blood boil. But someone framed stealing in a way that now makes me really angry anytime I come across a situation where someone had anything stolen, whether it be a catalytic converter, whether it be, you know, a robbery, a burglary, whatever. Because this is how it was framed. When someone steals from you, they're not just stealing that good, that material item or items. They are stealing your time. Because think about how hard we have to work. how many hours of our day deals with, in some cases, people we can't stand, right? A lot of people work jobs with coworkers they can't stand, with management they can't stand. Like day after day, we work in order to afford the things we need. And to have someone come and steal it from you, they're not only stealing those items, okay? Or in this case, stealing that money. They're stealing days, maybe even weeks of your life from you. And that makes me so angry. It makes me so angry to think about it that way. But you should think about it that way. That's what these scammers do, and they're disgusting.
100%.
Yeah.
And could steal, some of your faith in mankind. I mean, as I said, there were many replies to what he posted of people being like, no, I stand by you. I support you. And I just think, oh dear God, these people need help. They need help so badly. And I hate that they're being victimized in this way.
Totally agree. All right, let's switch gears entirely and talk about the Barbie movie because people are super fired up.
I'm sorry, you're telling me in the year of the Barbie movie, as coined by Mads, my very favorite creator, in the moment where I'm painting Barbie, literally painting Barbie, is when I have to find out that Greta and Margot are snubbed for Oscar noms. Should I smash my face through this, or should I paint 700 more of them and just start distributing them to the rest of the world?
I mean, you can do whatever you want, but that is what happened, and I don't understand why people are freaking out about this. So, look, what would the Oscars be if there wasn't some like outrage over who got nominated, who didn't get nominated? I mean, it's just like the most recycled news story of all time at this point. But this year, the Barbie movie is at the heart of an identity-based grievance, even though the film itself has been nominated in many categories. And it really has to do with the fact that one of the male actors was nominated, but the woman behind the movie and the main actress in the movie did not get nominated for Best Actress and Best Director. So Barbie received 8 Oscar nominations on Tuesday morning, including the Best Picture. Ryan Gosling, who by the way performed very well in that movie, was nominated for Best Supporting Actor. America Ferrera for Best Supporting Actress. Barbie was also nominated for Best Adapted Screenplay, Costume Design, and Production Design. The other 2 nominations were for original songs, I'm Just Ken and What Was I Made For? But people are upset because director Greta Gerwig and lead actress Margot Robbie didn't receive nominations in specific categories for the film. Now, Gerwig was not nominated for Best Director. Those who were nominated include Jonathan Glazer for The Zone of Interest, Yorgos Lanthimos for Poor Things, Christopher Nolan for Oppenheimer, Martin Scorsese for Killers of the Flower Moon, which I just recently watched and was a very good movie, and Justine Triet for Anatomy of a Fall. Now, Margot Robbie was apparently overlooked for Best Actress. That's what the naysayers are saying here. Those who were nominated for Best Actress include Annette Bening for Nyad, Lily Gladstone for Killers of the Flower Moon, Sandra Hüller for Anatomy of a Fall. Anatomy of a Fall, my bad. And then Carey Mulligan for Maestro, Emma Stone for Poor Things. So it should be added that Gerwig and Robbie were nominated for other categories, just not for Best Director and Best Actress. Gerwig got a nod for Best Adapted Screenplay for the film, which she co-wrote with Noah Baumbach. And then Robbie's work as executive producer, for which she is up for Best Picture, included convincing Mattel to take real risks in how the character and the company was portrayed. I don't know, John, like, is it bad that I don't care? Like, why is everyone freaking out about this?
Look, you not caring about who gets an award for a movie is the most reasonable thing in the world. I don't think.
Thank you. I feel like people are gonna be mad that I don't care.
Oh, I'm about to be mad at you. I'm just saying in general, I don't think you're obligated to care about that. I don't care about most of these other movies that you mentioned. They seem like real downers and I didn't watch them. But I did see Barbie and I think if you're gonna have an awards show and if it's going to celebrate talent and all that, then yes, I do think both of these are snubs. I think, look, they're not.
But why?
They're snubs. Why are they stuck? Well, first of all, you can just say directly in comparison to the acknowledgement that Greta Gerwig got as a director and Margot Robbie got as an actress in other awards shows. It is weird that it is out of step with the other awards shows. Generally, those things run roughly in line. I would say I think it like makes perfect sense that Greta Gerwig would be nominated for this, for the sort of project that it is. It is, I think, a very director-centric sort of movie. It's a different sort of movie than you might expect, that required a strong hand, that had a ton of incredibly complex and interesting physical sets, that had huge casted music scenes. I think there's good reason that she should get it. And also generally, Best Picture and Best Director tend to go together, because that's how you produce a Best Picture, is with a strong director. And I also think that Margot Robbie, I think, did very well in this. I think that she deserves the nod. I think Ryan Gosling, I honestly think it's kind of weird that he's up for Best Supporting Actor. I always hate the distinction between those two. He was in the entire movie. He should have been up for Best Actor if he's gonna be up for anything. So look, it doesn't matter. People aren't gonna live or die based on these, but I do think that they're snubs.
I think, look, if I were to be cynical, and why not? Let's be cynical.
The first time ever.
I think, look, I think that the Academy nominated Ryan Gosling specifically for this movie rather than, the director and main actress, because they would get exactly what they're getting right now. Everyone, like, would everyone be talking about the Oscars right now if this like controversy wasn't happening? And also, like, okay, let me ask you something. If Ryan Gosling wasn't nominated at all for the film, would people be up in arms about it? It feels like people are demanding that, well, if a man got a nomination from this film, which was obviously targeted toward a female audience, and had a feminist message within it, well then absolutely, then it means that the female actor should absolutely get nominated too. And it just feels, I don't know.
I'm sure there are some people that feel that way. I think that most of the people pointing out just think that it is a topical bit of irony, considering the message of the film. It seems funny. I don't think anyone's begrudging him the nomination. I don't even really consider myself much of a Ryan Gosling fan, but he was very good in the movie. I was just saying I think he should have been up for Best Actor instead. It's just weird if you're going to acknowledge him and America Ferrera, which I think that's the weird nomination here. I understand that she did a hell of a job with the monologue that she did, but it was a very small role. It seems out of line to me with the other
controversy.
I think America Ferrera, if given the choice, would have rather had Margot Robbie be up for it. But
you heard it here first, folks. John Iadarola, anti-America. Consider it.
Nice. Anyway, look, I think that Margot Robbie did a really good job and it deserved recognition.
She did.
It was. Look, I understand that she was playing a toy, but it was a complex role. She showcased a lot of emotion. There was an arc there. I think it was interesting. I think the movie succeeded for a lot of different reasons, but I think Margot Robbie was a big part of it and deserved recognition for that.
Yeah, look, I think that a lot of this is, and by the way, I totally agree with you on Margot Robbie's performance. I enjoyed the film. So this is not me trying to like poo-poo their performances at all. It's just, a lot of this outrage just feels hollow and a little ridiculous at times, and that's where I'm coming from. And I haven't watched all the other films that have been nominated in the categories that are, dealing with all this controversy at the moment, so I can't really weigh in, but a lot of this is subjective. That's the other thing. And I don't know who's in the Academy. I don't know how they make their decisions in regard to who gets nominated, like what are their standards, how, like what is their system? I don't know. And honestly, I don't care. What I do know is that this story will be recycled next year with different actors and different people. So buckle up for that. In the meantime, we're gonna take a break, and when we come back, we have other stories to get to, including, are millennial managers the worst? Maddie writes in again. Maddie's the one with the cool shed. I just saw they shouted me out and I have suddenly lost all trace of my train of thought from excitement. BRB while I figure out a way to show Anna and John my hollowed shed domain. I would love to see that, but thank you for writing in again, Maddie. Let's actually read some super chats, and maybe if we have time, I'll read more member comments in the bonus episode. Frank, I feel like you specifically make comments about what's happening in Gaza to trigger me, and I'm not gonna get triggered, but I just wanna let you know that at certain times on the show, when you've written in with your super chats, you have shown your humanity and you've shown that you are a caring and kind person. And I just ask that you tap into that a little bit when you consider what innocent people are going through in the Gaza Strip. People who are not part of Hamas, people who did not vote for Hamas. Remember, half the population wasn't even alive when Hamas was voted in 2006. Just consider that and ask yourself how you would feel if a foreign government's military came in and just demolished your entire neighborhood. Aaron Talks Culture says, can the left unite on this? Live and let live, workers' rights, don't be an a-hole. Done, totally agree. Me writes in and says he probably counting the sale of Boy Scout popcorn. I'm not entirely sure what that comment was in regard to, which story it was in regard to, but thanks for writing in, me, I appreciate it. The name's Bogdo says, Anna, appreciate what you give of yourself to report. Thank you. Frank Rockefeller says, angry antisocial individuals, creatures of postmodernists, existential consequences of madness. Kina writes in and says, Anna, these stories are devastating and I see the pain that you go through having to report them. Thank you for bringing the truth. Yeah, the Gaza stories are really rough. And they're rough for everybody who cares enough to dig deeper into them and do more than like quick 3-minute reports. And I want to give a lot of credit to all the folks out there who work in media, who work in independent media specifically, and do a good job with these deep dives to ensure that they give a voice to Palestinians. What I keep hearing over and over again from Palestinians who get interviewed on the ground in Gaza is they think the international community has forgotten about them, that we don't care about them. And I wish that they had some way of seeing how much people actually do care about what they're going through and how we feel that this is a pretty gross injustice. But anyway, thank you to the audience for being supportive of the work we do. We wouldn't be able to do this without you. Sean D. Huskins gifted 5 TYT memberships. Thank you so much for your support. And BB gifted 1 TYT membership. You guys are amazing. Let's get back to the show. Welcome back to the show, everyone. Anna Kasparian and John Idarola with you. For those of you who are not members to TYT, I usually toss to Happy Half Hour, which airs right after our bonus episode for our members. Happy Half Hour is a great show hosted by our very own Brett Ehrlich. You can watch after the bonus episode tonight at 5:30 p.m. Pacific, 8:30 p.m. Eastern at twitch.tv/TYT. All right. Let's give Anne Hathaway some credit because she did something pretty fantastic, and she seems like a wonderful person. So I was lovey-dovey about her anyway. But this story makes me like her even more. Actress Anne Hathaway showed what it means to have solidarity with workers when she decided to basically walk out of a photo shoot, a Vanity Fair photo shoot to be exact, after hearing that Condé Nast's union was staging a 24-hour walkout. Now, nearly 400 union members who work at Condé Nast are currently holding a 24-hour work stoppage to basically protest the layoffs and negotiation practices they claim are unlawful. So just to give you an idea, Condé Nast is not like struggling financially. They can't claim that that's the reason for the layoffs. In November, CEO Roger Lynch announced that expected revenue was up for a 3rd straight year, but that the company needed to lay off 5% of their workers, roughly 300 people, including 94 employees in the union. Now, the company also announced last week that its music outlet Pitchfork is being folded into GQ, resulting in several layoffs. And the union is arguing that management has violated labor laws by reducing its proposed severance offer for laid off employees. But there's more. Other alleged workplace violations. For instance, 94 union members is almost 20% of our union. The company is legally obligated to bargain over these layoffs, but they allege that that bargain didn't happen. And so they warned last week that they were planning to stage a walkout, 24-hour walkout, writing on X that nearly 400 of us have pledged to stop work when our bargaining committee calls for a 24-hour walkout. A retweet to tell Condé Nast you stand with workers. Stop breaking the law, stop union busting, and stop the layoffs. And guess what? They did follow through on what they threatened to do. The day after the Academy Award nominations were announced, normally a very busy time for Condé Nast writers, employees at Vanity Fair, Vogue, GQ, Allure, Glamour, and other Condé Nast publications walked out to hold a rally in front of the company's offices in New York. And then Anne Hathaway got involved. So apparently Hathaway was completely unaware of the work stoppage when she arrived at the New York City photo shoot. She was still in hair and makeup when her team was notified by a staffer from SAG-AFTRA to advise Hathaway to support the work stoppage. The source said they hadn't even started taking photos yet. Once Anne was made aware of what was going on, she got up from hair and makeup and left. And so Hathaway standing with the Condé Nast workers is particularly fitting when you consider some of the movies that she has starred in, especially The Devil Wears Prada, one of my favorite movies. It's one of those movies that I watch at least once a year because it's always enjoyable. And in that film, she plays the role of an intern at Vogue, and she has this incredibly cruel boss. It's a fictional magazine, right, called Runway, but it's based off of Vogue. Meryl Streep's character was based on Anna Wintour, who's a longtime editor-in-chief of Vogue. And it was reported this week that Wintour kept her sunglasses on while laying off Condé Nast employees, which is like so gross. But anyway, before I get to more details of this story, I'm curious what you think so far, John.
Well, I'm very glad that not too many weeks ago, I, for the first time ever, saw most of that movie. So I feel prepared to talk about this, and it was not bad. So bearing in mind that, no, it's a fine movie. I was more invested in it than I thought it would be. But anyway, bearing in mind that Anne Hathaway is an incredibly wealthy person who's going to be perfectly fine no matter what happens. I like this. I think, especially when you dive into like sort of the timeline of when she and her team found out about this, you know, it might seem like, well, the obvious thing is that you walk out, but in the moment she hears that there's going to be the stoppage. Does she have the time or the ability to do research into what negotiations have happened or not? You know, she doesn't necessarily have the ability to really know a lot about what's going on, and so you feel the pressure to act without a lot of information and potentially with consequences if you are perceived to have gotten it wrong. Her walking out could have consequences to people who are, you know, like struggling to survive. They don't seem like significant consequences, her not maybe getting more covers or something, but that is her life and she is willing to risk that to send a message. And so I do admire that. It reminds me of, you know, there were the actors who, like when the SAG-AFTRA strike was announced, they were like right about to do events for, I think it was for Oppenheimer and for Barbie, and they immediately stopped right then. I love when people use their platform like that, particularly when they're risking, you know, damage to their career.
I totally agree. And you know, her instinct was, I need to support the workers, even if she didn't have all the details behind the 24-hour work stoppage. And that is a good instinct to have, especially as someone who's an actress. And remember, very recently there was a strike for actors and actresses, and I'm sure they enjoyed the solidarity. So to return that for the Condé Nast unionized workers, I think makes a lot of sense, and I'm happy to see that she did that. So just a lot of credit to Anne Hathaway. With that said, let's move on to our final story of the day because this one kind of surprised me. I didn't see this coming. Let's talk about Jon Stewart. Well, as we get into the heat of the election season, Jon Stewart has announced that he will be returning to The Daily Show. And that's after nearly a decade of not being on The Daily Show, after retiring from The Daily Show. Now, Paramount Global announced Wednesday that Jon Stewart, who hosted the talk show during its most impactful popular years, will take up hosting duties on Monday nights beginning February 12th, the Monday after the Super Bowl. He will also be an executive producer. Stewart will remain as part-time host throughout the 2024 election cycle, with rotating hosts throughout the rest of the week. He will also serve as executive producer for every episode through 2025. And according to the network, Stewart was given the Monday slot because Mondays are apparently the most watched days for that show in particular during the week, and a catch-up day for weekend news. Paramount has been seeking a new host since Trevor Noah left the show in 2022. Since then, Comedy Central has been cycling through a rotating cast of guest hosts to basically fill the void, and that list includes Charlemagne the God, Sarah Silverman, Leslie Jones, and Michelle Wolf. So I remember how impactful Jon Stewart was on The Daily Show, during the Bush years, during the Obama administration, and he was pretty much on point on a lot of those issues. And I'm curious if you still have the same feelings about Jon Stewart, because I feel like some on the left have actually moved a little further, like to the left of him, and I'm curious what you think.
Sure. Well, look, I would say for someone on the level like that, I don't expect that they're going to match or exceed me on every topic, or else they're dead to me. That's just not. You're never going to be satisfied. That's never going to happen on TV. So no, I'm sure that we don't agree on some things, but I think we probably agree on the bulk of them, and that's good. And to have someone who shares at least a significant portion of my values, who's able to express it in a powerful and forceful way, who has already shown their willingness to go beyond just commentary to, get on the ground and fight to, make good on certain policies. I think that that's great. I think that him having a platform is awesome. I'm a little bit conflicted about this for a few reasons. So the first is, you would think that they would have been able to settle on a host. They've had an abundance of talented people that have been serving on there, and it seems weird that they haven't been able to pull the trigger. All of those names that you said would have done a great job. I think that, and others who guest hosted, less frequently. So that seems a little bit weird. I'm also, I wonder what he's going to be like on it. It's been years and years since he did the show. I am hoping that he's ready to hit the ground running, and I'm sure he'll feel freed up to talk about the sorts of topics that he wants to, that he was sort of stymied in being able to do on his Apple show. They apparently had a lot of friction over him covering certain topics. So I want him to be unleashed. So maybe this will serve that function. But I would also say that the media landscape is very different than it was back when he was hosting that show. That was a very singular show for a very long time, certainly on TV. You didn't have people who were questioning Fox News in that way. Now it's everybody does that, but they were one of the the leads in that. So I hope that he also is willing and able to sort of update it. But that said, I'm sure it will help draw eyes back to it, which will help out the other hosts too. And I wouldn't be surprised if it goes beyond just him doing this year.
You stole my point, but it was a great point, and I'm glad you made it. It's true, the media landscape is different. And what made The Daily Show with Jon Stewart as its host so popular was, yes, Jon Stewart as the host. He was funny, he was really good at conducting the interviews on that show. So he's talented, I'm not taking that away from him. But the show at the time was kind of novel. There weren't many options out there for people who were looking for political comedy, someone who was able to cut through the BS and have a show that holds people in positions of power and accountable, while also questioning the status quo, challenging the status quo. I agree. I do think that the show might need to be updated to some extent, but I like that Jon Stewart's coming back. I'm really curious to see how the show performs once he's hosting on Mondays. So we'll see how it plays out. Really interesting news. I didn't expect it at all. And we'll see how it plays out. But for now, we're not gonna take a break. We're gonna wrap the show. But for our members, we're not done yet. tyt.com/join to become a member and check out the other stories we have ready for you.